Good morning, everybody. This is Tom Broussard. It's great to see everybody again. We've been talking a lot about aphasia awareness. A lot of articles, a lot of presentations about it. And it continues to be something that's always been bothering us. And the fact is that around the world, of course, nobody knows much about aphasia. That's something we understand. But here in the United States, and with even the hospitals and healthcare providers, um, they know what aphasia is, but they don't do much about it in terms of understanding how their customers are that will never know about aphasia until they find their way into a rehab facility sometime after they're discharged. So it is very, very interesting. And all of us, there are millions of people with aphasia here in the United States. Um, and we are having a hard time, and we're trying hard to make the public be more aware about aphasia. Um, and that is what we're up to now, is just figuring out what are some of the infrastructure that would allow people to be more aware of aphasia as a matter of course if you have stroke. And 25 to 40% of people with stroke acquire aphasia. The interesting thing is that when you are discharged from a hospital, many hospitals, they don't even use the lexicon of aphasia on their website or their literature. So you'll have very, very, very little bit of information about aphasia. Um, Even though all the nurses, doctors, staff, everybody knows what aphasia is, but it's just not something that they have used as part of their conversation. If somebody actually has a stroke and aphasia, they won't talk about you having aphasia or their family. They'll be saying, we understand you're having communication problems. And once we stabilize you here, you will go to a rehab facility at some point and you'll learn more about that. Not that they're going to have that conversation with you. So, and that's number one. Number two is when you are discharged, a lot of hospitals do provide a packet of information for people who are stroke survivors. So there is lots of information about stroke, but very little, if anything, about aphasia. And this is the people who actually have stroke and are discharged. That means everybody, including the 25 to 40% of people leaving having aphasia with no information about aphasia. That is a big, big issue too. Um, and the one of the hospitals I'm working with now gave me their packet, and every single person who has discharge gets this packet, and I got copies of them, and they had one mention of aphasia. It's in a glossary in the back, and it's one line explaining what aphasia is. Again, even the hospital is well aware that they should be doing something with the people who have aphasia, because they're discharged with no information about aphasia, and two, many hospitals are discharged home, and then they'll stay home, or eventually they will find their way into a rehab facility or environment. But as much as possible, what hospitals try to do, and I really applaud them for what they do, is they are really good with people with stroke. They want to stabilize you, get you ready to take whatever the next stage might be. But that is what they do. And the interesting thing is that the when you are discharged home and you have no information that they've given you, and now, although you might choose to take other rehabilitation options, you might not go anywhere. Less of transportation, too far from home, not insurance or not enough insurance, all kinds of reasons. And many hospitals often discharge to home, and then half of those do not take any more rehabilitation options for all those hundreds of thousands of people with aphasia. Again, the only way I can imagine that we need to do is change the way we communicate about aphasia at hospitals and provide information um, at their point of discharge, not only with more material about stroke, but also material about um, aphasia, which is why I wrote the book, The ABCs of Aphasia, as part of the package to make people ready to go home. so that even if they are discharged and don't go anywhere else, at least they have the information that comes out of the ABCs of aphasia. Everything you need is there, starting with the images that a person like me, when I had my first stroke, I had a hard time understanding words, hearing words. But when I saw the images, then I began to understand that that was the doorway to understanding images and then words and then sentences and moving forward. But it really all starts with the images. So the what I say here with this article, raising aphasia awareness, we can't keep preaching just to the choir. That is a big deal. We can't just keep on talking as if somebody would get it. If we just keep talking to just ourselves in our aphasia community, which is wonderful. That's sort of the beginning of us not only raising awareness, but it also is part and parcel of how we do get better by virtue of the social groups and the socialization that comes as a result of how the brain works with the converting thought and cognitive activities, including those group discussions, into new matter, excuse me, brain matter with plasticity. So, but the hospitals, as we can educate them, I think they will educated enough to realize that, oh, we must do more with people with aphasia. There are millions of us here in the United States, and it would help us a lot for us to further educate the people that are just about to be discharged a little bit more about aphasia for all kinds of reasons, including the case that they might not go anywhere else. So to begin to understand it is to read a packet not unlike the ABCs of aphasia. Excuse me. I had my PCP, my primary physician, recently, and we were talking by telemed, and he asked what I was doing. And this is actually, we were in Maine, and before I got my doctor, I had my doctor in Florida, and we had a telemed, and he asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I donated a bunch of my ABCs of aphasia to your hospital because your website does not show anything. And he was pretty much aghast because he's on the board of that same hospital. And he really couldn't understand why there's no information about that. And the fact that I have to donate copies to them, he did not know that. And when I showed him on the website, even to this day, if you put aphasia in the search box, it'll come out and say no response. How can that possibly be? And it's not like that's the only hospital. There are plenty of other hospitals in the country, around your state, big hospitals. The biggest hospital in your state, they still don't have any information. So if you discharge somebody, let's say 1,000 people are discharged a year, and on the low end, that's 25%, then you're discharging 250 people every year with no information about this disorder they happen to have. How can that possibly be? And of course, across the country, there are 800,000 people in the United States with stroke. And again, you can work your way down and get to the 25%. And typically at that point, you could have as many as easily 225,000 people who are discharged every year with aphasia, and you go home with nothing, no information. Hundreds of thousands of people discharged every year with no information about the disorder you have. Again, I don't press the hospitals. I have to educate the hospitals by people like me and other people with aphasia, because nobody else can do this. I doubt that the speech language pathology are going to have to somehow go to the staff and leadership at the hospital that employs them and say, oh, you really should do more about aphasia for our customers. That would be a difficult lift for them just because of the way things work. So we have to take a more social policy attack on this to demonstrate basically that when you have somebody who is admitted to a hospital, they understand they have stroke. Everybody knows about stroke. This is really people taking that next step, since a huge component also have aphasia, the loss of language. So you have to realize that as much as we have admitted these people into the hospital, we've stabilized them, they do have this thing called aphasia, they will go to a rehab facility if able. But if they don't, or if it takes a month or two, in my case, it took a month before I went to a rehab facility. And we did nothing. My wife did look at things. Of course, I couldn't read them, but you need these tools and images that you can get even earlier, before you start the the journey at your rehab facility, if you're able to at that point in time. So to have those customers, as they were, who really like what they do at that hospital, and they're discharged really liking that hospital because they're now alive after their stroke, they still leave without knowing that a huge component of that disorder that they now have, the servers at that hospital are not telling you that you have this disease, that you're going to have to figure this out for the rest of your life. And unless you get a book like the ABCs of Aphasia as part of a package, you'll spend years figuring out what's going on, even if you go to a aphasia stroke group. And you do learn a little bit here and there, a month, an hour here, an hour there, a week, if you're lucky. It does take time for you to figure out how aphasia works, and also for the hospitals and the wider public to understand the linkage between stroke and aphasia. Because if you're not connected to the fact that you had a stroke and got aphasia, and now you go out into the public and they say, what is this thing? And you say aphasia, and they go, well, what is that? Is it a new disease? Is it from a new country? It is a new religion, whatever it might be. Aphasia has to be connected. And that too is part of the issue, is the linkage. And it's not unlike what it took such a long time, as I've been told, the linkage between HIV and AIDS, that took years before they would finally connect the linkage between HIV and AIDS for the larger public, for the wider public to understand that linkages for HIV and AIDS, as well as stroke / aphasia. So I do appreciate that we have a lot of work to do to wrestle through the siloed effect between one silo who is very good at what they do and another silo also very good at what they do. The conventional hospitals do what they do, including the big stroke groups. They're really good what they do. They deliver a person ready to go to the rehab. They too know what they do. What has to happen is we have to fill in the gap between, because people are discharged without knowing about aphasia, find out about aphasia over here, and in the meantime, they don't know anything in that gap, and maybe they don't even get to go to the rehab, so they are now home alone with nothing about this thing, of which is called an invisible disease, for lots of reasons, including the fact that nobody knows what that is. So we do have to work on building the infrastructure here to have people go to hospitals, be discharged with the appropriate amount of information. And I do think that these hospitals and all of their leadership will definitely understand that and say, oh, this is something, it's not something that broke as much as it just never appeared before, with this larger and larger population of people with aphasia, and certainly a wider public who knows nothing about aphasia, yet still looking for the source of understanding it, which is really the linkage between stroke and aphasia going forward. So I continue to appreciate having the opportunity to talk with everybody today. All the people listening should certainly talk to other people around you, to your hospitals, clinicians, your SLPs. Ask the SLPs why wouldn't they, can you help? bring me with you. I'd be happy to talk as a person with stroke and aphasia to the people about why it is so important that we build this bridge and this infrastructure between conventional hospitals to rehab, as well as connected to the out to the wider public when discharged home with no other opportunity for additional rehab opportunities. Thank you very much. Have a good week, and I will see you in next month in a couple more weeks talking about more information about stroke, aphasia, recovery, and plasticity, which is really the foundation for all of this, which is another reason why we need to educate the people about aphasia, because it turns out that the keyhole to how we get better is through plasticity, and that is the key to how everybody else in the world, every human, learns based on plasticity. And everybody should know at least a little bit about how their brain works, because I certainly didn't know. But learning just a little bit about how the brain works allows you then to know a lot about how the brain works when it comes to learning anything. Thanks again. Nice to see you, and I will see you soon. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.